Okay, so I guess I'll just do a little introduction. I'm Genevieve Pardoe. I was the Queen's mentor for June of this year, and I'm the founder of Fallon Publishing. So I was just saying to David here that I'm sort of like a conduit in between the indie publishing world and mainstream publishing, and I am also a writing coach. So, David, do you want to give a little kind of background about yourself and how we connected?
Yeah, great. Hi everyone, and thanks very much, Genevieve, for making time to chat today. Yeah, so we connected through Ben with the Queen's Student Alumni Association, who is just fantastic in terms of getting us connected in all sorts of cool industries and interests. Um, I'm rather optimistically thinking about drafting a book, and so what I found is that the way to go into the publishing world is a little bit unclear. So I tried to look at lots of different websites, and there's kind of different ways that it suggests in the non-publishing, sorry, the self-publishing route, traditional publishing, and it seems like there's a smattering of other ways as well. My background is in politics, and so I finished at Queen's in 2016, currently based in the UK, where I work on large international development programs, mainly with the World Bank and the UK government in Pakistan and India. So the interest area is quite distinct from my day job, but I think that's what's great about Ben and the alumni team at Queen's is being able to connect alumni who have really diverse interests and hopefully get some clarity about the way forward.
We certainly do have diverse interests. So I was just saying to David before we hopped on, my master's degree is in geopolitics, and I have a very kind of non-linear track within my career. So I always want to convey the message that by no means are you pigeonholed in any way, even if it is kind of a side project or a passion project that you'd like to write a book or whatever it is. So I certainly did not have kind of the straight and narrow path, even within starting my own business. So it's interesting that you brought up self-publishing. That term, I would start there. I would say even in and of itself, it has changed so much. So technically I would be kind of like an indie publisher, I guess, but or a small imprint, you could say. So people who are starting to think about writing their first book, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, memoir, a how-to guide, business book, whatever it is, it can be really daunting to look at the big publishing houses. If you're not familiar, even literary agents, they are receiving so many submissions, and you can land on their website and they all have their own protocol and process for submitting. But to be honest, they do have marketing mandates that they have to meet. So very similar to if you look at film, you look at production houses that put up Spider-Man, Transformers, they're called a tentpole model. So it's very similar in publishing. There are some big names that are going to hold up the entire business. So, or the entire company, I would say. So when you're submitting, it is a little bit of a needle in a haystack. Over the last 10 years, we've seen self-publishing, indie publishing really take off. And that's not just from the authors who are savvy and are we're working with someone like me who can kind of be the middleman, but it's also the fan base, which is great. So if you're in the fiction world, a lot of readers are actually seeking out self-published authors or indie authors. So what is the book that you are hoping to write?
Yeah, so it's a bit, I guess it kind of falls between the cracks a little bit. So it's nonfiction, and it's still trying to figure out what the title will be, but the working one is something along the lines of like Curious Capitals. So it's looking at the bizarre, quirky aspects of world capitals. I've always enjoyed traveling. Always enjoyed kind of the more bizarre aspects of what makes cities tick. And I think partly is the work I'm doing right now, which has more of an urban development focus. There's also just a general nerdy interest in kind of the quirky bits of cities. So in Ottawa, for example, how there is beneath the Parliament building, there's a 1960s working vending machine, which sells Coke bottles still in that original way, right through to in some of the Central Asian states about some of the more grandiose schemes that they've got there. And it's just kind of a celebration that everything's kind of weird and wacky, but it's quite interesting. And so I've drafted about 50 or so far. I'm trying to treat them all relatively equally, so 500, 600 words each, 4 or 5 facts, and then try and have a fun, optimistically humorous take on it, but make sure that's very well researched as well. So I suppose it's a bit of Bill Bryson meets, based on kind of the Bill Bryson meets The Economist style approach, trying to ensure it's not it's certainly not a guidebook. It's not intended to be a big coffee table book, but rather just kind of more of a literary creative nonfiction approach.
That's
I'm
so
not
cool.
sure if that's clear enough, but that's kind of the rough idea.
I feel like cities certainly do have like a character almost of their own. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I've had a look at, to see if there's anything else in the market. There's a few things. So I haven't found that much, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure. But yeah, there are a few. I mean, so I think one of the best known ones, which isn't exactly the same thing, but Atlas Obscura is quite big. And so it's mainly user driven, but appreciating odd, quirky places around the world. But they're usually quite bite-sized. There's a few British authors which have a focus on either places that have disappeared or some empires that have fallen, again, with quite a humorous, tongue-in-cheek take on it. But doesn't seem to be yet anything specifically about cities, let alone capital cities.
And so did you set out an outline, or did you just sit down and start writing? This is something where there's really no wrong answer, by the way, except that you must write in the morning. That's like kind of the only rule. That's when the brain is working. I don't need to sell people on that. But from like, if I put on my writing coach hat, and this would be kind of the very beginning of the, how do I write a book? How do I get it published? Some people like to have the outline and have everything quite organized and the roadmap, if you will, whereas others like the freestyle. So just curious, what is your style?
Yeah. So it was a bit of both, I suppose. There's a consistent structure to each, I don't know if you want to call it like a vignette or a entry or whatever you call it. Reasonably set structure to them. So I guess that's quite standard, but in terms of which ones to go after and how it originally was conceived, it just kind of sat down and started writing, and then it went back, adjusted it quite a bit afterwards to plan out and plot how it would be structured in terms of the structure for each entry, but also which cities to focus on, which regions, how many in each region, and so on. I suppose it was pretty bottom up.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And when you're writing your first book, there's no timeline. One thing I always tell my authors is you are not an editor at this point. You're just the writer. The writer and the editor cannot coexist in the same brain. So a lot of people get quite tripped up about that. It doesn't sound like you are, but that's definitely a key point. Like that's a tip I give to first time, to anyone really. You must go back, you must review 1,000 times, but also there is a juncture at which it's got to go to your editor. So if we're for yourself, David, or anyone who's looking to self-publish, there's definitely a point at which you want to bring in an editor. That is entirely up to the writer in terms of, is this comprehensive editing? Is this like a story editor who's going to help you pull it all together? Sometimes it's just light proofreading. Everyone knows kind of where they land, are we talking typos or like, someone to, like I said, bring everything together. So that would be the next step. So how are you thinking in terms of your timeline? Like where are you in terms of wrapping it all together?
Yeah, so I started last November.
Okay.
Yeah, so was that 8 months ago? And my intention was to have a full draft done within about a year. And it kind of goes in fits and starts in terms of how much time to dedicate to it. Go like a month without looking at it, and then a couple of furious days of trying to put some words together, which again, I'm not sure if that's really like the best way to do it. I mean, it might be better to have a more consistent approach, but just in terms of work and other commitments, you kind of squeeze it in where you can. But yeah, I'd be really happy if by November you could have a somewhat okay draft that's done. But it'd be great to hear from you. I mean, what for a fiction piece like this that would be considered for publication somewhere, what a word count might look like, and then also I'm also aware that you need to have not a proof, it's a proposal rather, outlining what's needed, particularly for fiction pieces, nonfiction pieces.
Yeah.
Any suggestions you have there would be great.
For sure. So first of all, I just wanted to say you brought up kind of taking some breaks because life happens. And I think that's really important to take a break and then come back to it. You won't be at your most creative or kind of intellectually optimal if your head is in the writing all the time. So yes, consistency is good, a routine is good, but it's nice to kind of set your goal, your benchmark, and then reach it, whatever it is, 12,000 words, a couple chapters, go away, and then come back. So in terms of a proposal, literary agents and all mainstream publishers have their own stipulations. So you can go and do that research, look at competitors as well. You mentioned Bill Bryson. So look at kind of that landscape where you fit in terms of word count, style. Down the road, you'd be looking at their covers, typography, even things like that. But in terms of submission, it's it is case by case, but it's generally going to be a couple chapters, your bio, and where you see the book fitting in to the marketplace. That's a new thing that you'll notice over the last couple of years. Even mainstream publishers and literary agents are asking you to do a lot of the work. So again, there will be different kind of different submission guidelines and different criteria, but generally you're looking at a couple chapters, the overall direction of the book, the outline, and then where you see it placed, and then of course your bio and your experience as a writer.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. And with trying to identify what market you're going after, what impact or influence does your social media activity have on that, and any other work that you've done? Particularly, I mean, if you've been able to publish academic articles in the past, that have much bearing on being able to put something forward to a non-academic publisher?
Oh my gosh, they will look at academic to your social media presence, depending on, they want to know if they can market you. So they want to know if you, where you are as a writer. So academic work is absolutely valid. Absolutely. And like I said, let's say it was like maybe a young adult book that you were writing, they would want to see, are you marketable? Do you have a big social media presence? Things like that. So anything that you have done from the writing to the marketing, media coverage, it doesn't even have to be in a parallel industry. That's fine. It all counts. Absolutely. That's a great question. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. And then when you're going after trying to find a literary agent, so you mentioned, look at competitors, look at other authors who've written books in the same area or linked areas. Is there a database or is there a service that's preferred to try and identify which literary agent to go to?
No, but that's a really good business idea. If there is one, I'm not aware of it. What I tell people to do is look on Amazon. So Amazon is not a retailer, right? They're like Google. So everything has a tag and a category associated with it. So let's take your book, for example. I know you said it's not a travel guide, but I would still look within that. Just there are many, many different searches that you should do. But let's just say travel guide. Then you'll scroll down and you'll see other recommended titles. And then you can say travel guide, nonfiction. So play around with it and you'll see what's popping up for you.
I understand. Okay. And then does Amazon typically have the literary agent that would be linked to that book?
No. So what you could do for that is a separate search, such as a Google search. You can look for, again, travel guide, literary agent. Look at the publishers as well. It's really simple. Look at the books that you read. Who's publishing them?
Mhm.
And then
Okay.
pretty much go from there. The benefit of being an unknown or a new author is that you can put your hand up and ask questions and you can reach out. I mean, you really, right? People I find, especially Canadian writers, there's a lot of friendly faces in the industry. So just reach out to them. I can include some names to literary agencies in Toronto that I know of. That's where I'm based now. There's some speaker agencies as well. So it is really about networking. That was actually my big plug for June. I can backtrack. It's really about asking the questions and hopping on. So I guess this will be posted on LinkedIn. I'll put some links for yourself and for other people to reference as well. And again, no one's going to shoot you down for asking a question, but look on their websites. Like the Rights Factory is one that you might want to consider. That's just off the top of my head. And if they can't help you, they'll point you in the right direction. But I do find, again, especially as a first-time author, you'll often get really good feedback. If you've submitted something that isn't quite right, in my experience, people will often say, thank you, but no thank you, but here's where you might want to go. So it really is kind of just like anything. It's a matter of getting started.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Thanks. And I mean, you mentioned something really interesting there about the Canadian publishing landscape being particularly friendly. We were saying, yeah, when we were chatting earlier that you spent quite a bit of time in London, Bangkok, and elsewhere as well. How would you say that the Canadian publishing space compares to, say, the British one? And if you're a Canadian author, does it make sense, even if you're living outside of Canada for the time being, to aim for a Canadian publishing house or a subsidiary of a that's based in Canada?
So I haven't worked with British publishers, so I wouldn't know, but I'm a huge fan of Hay House. They're a British publisher. So they do more kind of well-being, health and well-being, self-help, that kind of thing. But they produce beautiful, beautiful work. They have amazing authors. Check them out anyway. Just, you never know.
Yeah.
They're worth looking into. So I can't say really how the landscape compares, but I will say for sure, because you're in Europe, that's where the market is going to be focused. So you're looking at different languages, different markets, like it's so much bigger. Canada is still, in so many ways, our media it's exciting, but we're really young still. We're really starting to not compete, but be recognized against our neighbors to the south. So that's who I would kind of more think about if I'm looking at a comparative kind of analysis there. Canada is small, friendly, but the fact that you're a Canadian author and a new author, even newspaper outlets, for example, I find, and CBC, for example, recognize new Canadian authors a lot more than I've seen in the States. So there's an opportunity to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I would say it that way. But so in your case, absolutely. You're from Ottawa. I would start in Ottawa, definitely, because it's also a great news story, right? You're like, you went to Queens and then now you're overseas, and like there's a good story to it. So you can look at it two ways. Is it disheartening that there's so much marketing in publishing? Maybe you're going to have to learn about like Facebook ads and all that stuff, right? Even if you go with the mainstream publisher, but it's kind of great because you get to tell your story and you get to be part of it as well. So, I mean, I definitely find that, and I've worked with authors like it's very, very different on the business side who have launched their businesses in Canada to inspiring memoirs, and fiction as well. So all the Canadian authors I've worked with, it's really nice to be able to pitch them to media because then they get to, get more traction and tell their story that way. So for you, start in Ottawa. Absolutely. Or Kingston, actually. Kingston as well.
Okay.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I never would have thought about that. That's really cool to hear that, like just kind of get that hometown focus and just build up from there.
I mean, Canadians love Canadians, right? Like we're a pretty great country, so why not? And then actually as a tip, I would say whether you go indie, mainstream, whatever, I don't know if you are on Twitter, but LinkedIn and Twitter are great platforms to share what you're writing about. Your topic is really interesting. It's really cool. So you can even post like one chapter or put an invitation on LinkedIn and get it peer reviewed. Why not? So I do agree. I believe that people need an editor, even maybe before they submit, but it's good to have peer review as well. So just don't go down a rabbit hole there, but a couple people reviewing your work and sharing what you're up to. Really fundamentally, you're just networking. So why not, right? It's only going to yield a kind of more traction and get to know more people. So
that's awesome. And it's cool thing about like what kind of channels and which avenues you take to market yourself. It's when you're drafting something which hopefully will be published. A bit random really, but speaking with a friend the other day about this, and they were saying that, why don't you think about TikTok and having like 10, 15 second TikTok videos about certain facts in these cities, and then kind of blowing it up that way. Is that a thing? Is that a thing you'd recommend?
So her name escapes me. She's the mentor for this month for August, and her, I think she graduated last year, and her LinkedIn intro was on TikTok. And I was like, you go, girl. That is not me. I would say this in life, publishing and everything, stay in your lane. So for me, I love Twitter and LinkedIn. That's where I live. Those are my people. And that works for me. Other people, you're going to get traction where you're more comfortable. If it's TikTok and Reels on Instagram, that's great. Do not be everything to everyone. And do not do it unless you're good at it, because social media is there. It does have a shorter lifespan, but first of all, you can't sit around all day doing social media. So I would pick one or two. A colleague of mine she was a client and a colleague, and we work together now. Her name is Blair Kaplan Venables, and she's kind of a social media expert. This is kind of her advice. I'm just filtering back to everyone. Do not be everything to everyone. Pick two platforms, and that's your thing. And know that TikTok does have a short lifespan. So something to think about, how often you want to post. And I would say do your research and just see what appeals to you. There's no right or wrong answer. Like you don't, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be quite time consuming. It can, from my experience working with my authors, if they're not really passionate about it, it can get disheartening. And they're like, I just wanted to write a book. Why am I focused? So pick something that you are, you feel comfortable posting on and engaging as well, because there's no point just popping it up there and leaving it, and something that you're going to do consistently. If you were my client, I would say, I don't know if it aligns perfectly with your reader.
That was my response too. Is that, I mean, I think that's super good advice. I mean, be creative, but also recognize kind of where the interest might be.
Think about your reader. That's another kind of tip I would say in terms of even pitching yourself to a lit agent or a publisher. Like always, when you're writing, write to the reader, because it's, number one, they want to know how it's going to sell. But they want to know who's going to enjoy it. Who is this person? So just like in marketing, we have a persona and we kind of create that avatar. So just being mindful of that. We could talk forever, even the type of font that my designer will choose when she does the typesetting and formatting. She's thinking about and speaking of staying in your lane, that I give to her, but she will say, oh, this age demographic goes with this font and it appeals to them, and this typesetting and da, da, da. So there's definitely a lot that goes into it. And with that, I would say, don't get bogged down. Don't worry about it. Just do the writing. It's okay. This is why people have teams. And some authors love marketing. Some are, diehard, only doing mainstream publishing, or some will publish themselves but still have a publicist, which is another option if you cannot find yourself a literary agent that you love, right? You can still self-publish and then go with a publicist. So there's so many ways that, like, indie publishing really opened up a kind of beautiful, all these avenues for people. I'm going on a tangent here, but it used to be kind of like, is it legitimate? Is it real? But it's truly tested by the market. So, the product is the product. And that's why there's a team. So I always say, don't get too bogged down and stay off TikTok probably.
Yeah. And that's really helpful advice. And I think advice I'll definitely follow. You talked about the team, and I assume that the team also includes designers and graphic specialists and so on.
Mm-hmm.
When you're developing the book, and when you've had other clients develop their books, how important is thinking about that design before you push it forward towards publication? I mean, is this something where you can say in the proposal, right, I'm kind of thinking this is what I'd like to do. I kind of like to have these photos, or are you expected to go out, find that person who can take those photos, or use your own, or find somebody who can develop those maps, or whatever it is? Or is that something that's often the responsibility of the publishing or literary agent to source that?
So if you were with taking the more mainstream route, that is you're going to relinquish some control for sure. Because they'll have the idea of the target and the channel upon which their channels where they're going to sell it. If you're going the indie route, I would say don't think about it until the end, because you're going to work with a designer anyway, and then they're going to find a visual way of articulating your story, your book. So it can be hard. It's so hard for writers of any genre, because they've just put everything into this beautiful book, and then it's like just represented by, the cover that someone's gonna like pick and choose. So it's really tough. And every single book I've published, we get to that point. It's like, oh my God. It's hard to kind of acquiesce and hand over your work to a designer and hope that they represent it. But anyway, that's basically it. Just like anything, if you're going more mainstream, you're going to have to relinquish some control. Oh, my dog has popped up in the background here joining us. Sorry. And anywho, whereas you do retain that control if we're going to hop back on. I'm going to stop recording and then we'll hop right back on.
Yeah, sounds good.
And now we're back for part 2, and that was a great example of working from home. I've been working from home for 10 years now, and so that's what happens. Are you working from home now too, David?
Yeah. I go to the office a couple times a week, but it's the office is pretty much still next to the kitchen.
So in our brief little intermission there, we were chatting about publishing mainstream and the marketing associated. And I did just want to say, so I took a course at UCLA many years ago. My instructor was also an author, and she said, so she was published mainstream. So this is going back about 10 years, but she still publishes, still writes. And she said the shift in mainstream marketing, mainstream publishing is a big shift, is that the authors have to take on so much more of their own marketing, even though they're under contract. And they, like I said, they're losing so much control over their own material. So it's not bad, because if you're selling 1 million copies, it's, you're in another ball game that perhaps an indie publisher can't get you to, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, because it's when you think about the commercial aspects of it, I mean, if you're making 10 or fewer cents on the dollar It's it does make you think, right? Okay, if you're doing this, I mean, certainly it's because you're doing it because it's a passion. I mean, no one's going to spend that long drafting anything if you're not actually passionate about it. But certainly, you want, if you're going to be publishing it, I think there's some expectation that there could be a financial return.
Right. I'm not saying, and you know what, do it. I did it. Like I said, I've submitted my first novel. I went through the process and everything. And then I kind of ran the numbers and I was like, it's not for me. So I do think it's a worthwhile process to go through and submit to a mainstream publisher or lit agent, talk to a publicist. Like there's more than one avenue that you can explore. And then I just wanted to reiterate, I love that you brought up the example of the academic writing, because again, anything like that. And as you are writing your book, for any author, I would say, look out for contests, Canadian contests, of course, and writing grants, just as we would like in undergrad and grad school, things like that. Look out for, sometimes publishers do like kind of a giveaway. So they'll help you with coaching or kind of do your research within your genre. There's a lot of funding in Canada for new writers, a lot of contests, a lot of opportunities to get published. So it's a quick Google search and why not? Even if you can submit an article, HuffPost is a big one, right? And it's kind of adjacent to what you're writing about, and it's all kind of creating, it's telling a story, pardon the pun, but it's telling a good story for your eventual lit agent or your publisher.
That's cool. Okay, no, that's, yeah, I'll look into that. It's, I just didn't really know that that exists in such quantity. That's awesome. Okay.
Awesome.
Check that out. Yeah, cool. And so with the indie publisher space, what does that look like in terms of approaching them? Is it more of a direct channel? Like there's no literary agent, it's just approaching the indie publisher directly, or is there a different method?
So yeah, I think in Canada it's called, so there's an indie publishing company, so kind of 12 more people than me. They're called Tellwell. They are on the West Coast, and they have a bit more of a formalized submission process. You can also pay them to be your editor, and they have kind of similar to what I offer as well: editing, story coaching, proofreading, marketing, publicity, the whole thing, and then designers. And then you have someone like me who's kind of a one-stop shop, and I've been really lucky. I launched my business during COVID last summer, and I've never really advertised or anything. It's all been word of mouth. So it's great. It's really busy, and I focus on female business owners and then legacy memoirs. That's my lane, and yeah, it's been working. So I take clients that I personally love their story and I want to work with them. Whereas if you get like a little bit more formal, and like I was saying before, 10 years ago, there would be no such thing as Tellwell, an actual legitimate business that is an indie publisher. But this is like the really cool evolution of this industry. It's really, publishing is it was like an old boys club forever. And now it's not. It's fantastic. It's really exciting the way it's changed. But anyway, so they would have a bit more of a submission process, and they would have, actually, I know I've been on their site, they have mainstream publishers and editors who just do this full time now. So again, you'll be paying a bit more, obviously, if you're working with a bigger business. And then someone like me, you'd be getting a much more kind of personal, dedicated, I'm kind of like your partner throughout the whole. So, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And what made you decide, right, I want to, grab this and make my own business?
I love stories. I love people's stories. That's why I love memoirs. I love hearing how women have started their own business, and I love their experience. And there is nothing like your author watching them hold their book for the first time and having that like, oh, moment. That's it. I love stories, and every author I've worked with are like completely different, and they're bringing their own passion to why they have been called to share their story. So yeah, I feel really privileged to work with the people that I do. I previously, for about 5 years, worked in romance. And so it was all fiction, the steamy and the thriller romance, which is like very different. But that's fun too.
I
So
bet. Yeah.
yeah. It's really, really simple. I love a good story.
Mm.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
And it, like I said, it's quite a departure from, the geopolitics, side, but it's kind of, and maybe not in some ways, actually, it's the narratives that I like. So,
Mm.
I love the process.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it sounds like it's going super well as well. I mean, that's getting lots and lots of interest, which is fantastic. And I think, as always, like the best marketing is word of mouth.
Absolutely. And even like networking like this is so fantastic. I hope I get to read your book when it is
Yeah,
finished. That would be amazing.
yeah, of course.
So you're hoping for November.
Oh, but yeah, to get an initial draft done by November. And I think by then, yeah, to take stock, see, right, okay, is this sufficient? I think probably get an editor at that stage
Yeah.
to have a pretty ruthless take at it. And
You're in
yeah, just
secret,
see.
so you'll be like surrounded by, I'm sure, amazing editors, or you can feel free to reach out again and I'll help you with that. And I just realized you asked the question and I didn't answer it. You were asking about word count. There are no rules. So if you were writing fiction, I would say stick to the novelette or novella, which is between 7,500 and 20,000 words. So novelette is 75 to 12,000, and then up to 20,000 is novella, just because that's like more palatable for first-time writers, but that's fiction. I have some female entrepreneurs who have stuck to that 25,000 word count, but I'm working with people now who are doing 120,000. So don't be held back. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You don't want your first novel to be 500 pages. Like Shantaram is like the famous story. It was like 1,200 pages or something.
Yeah, and didn't he have like
that's what an editor's for. So don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, and didn't he have like 3 attempts to write that because it kept on getting destroyed in prison?
I thought it was, yeah. Like talk about disheartening. We're up against
Yeah,
marketing.
exactly.
This guy was in jail having his book taken from him. Yeah. I feel like it was like 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just insane. I mean, it's also an amazing book. Absolutely amazing book.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
But Genevieve, thank you so much. This has been incredible. Just learning a bit more about your experience, your interest. I mean, I think it's also really cool that you're starting your own business and making it such a success. And thank you for sharing your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we could connect. And if we can like shout out to the Queen's Alumni Network as well. This has been, I'm sure, I know you were saying the same, like before we hopped on, like this has been such a wonderful experience to connect. And I know that, I mean, everyone I've spoken with, I know I can speak on David's behalf. Like, this is just like, it's really wonderful to be able to just say like, hi, I have a question. And then we can connect like this. So I'm appreciative of this group as well. And I'm certainly here if anyone has any more questions, or yeah, I'd love to chat anytime.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks.